Welcome to the White Hat Law Show with Warren Nord, where we cover a mix of current events, politics, and the law. Take it away, Warren.
Hi, I'm Warren Nord, and this is White Hat Law. Today's episode, we're going to be talking about election fraud, running for office, what it takes, how to do it wrong, how to go to jail. A lot of fun. With me today is Aaron Harris. Aaron Harris, Direct Action Texas. And anything else you want to tell us about Aaron?
So with Direct Action Texas, and we've been looking at election fraud for the last 2 years, and right now we have 4 ongoing criminal investigations with the Office of Attorney General in this very issue. So a little familiar with it.
Oh, I guess so. Wow. And we also have Kelly Handcock. Kelly Handcock is the Senator of District 9, which is North Richland Hills, and I guess somewhere around that?
Northeast Tarrant County, all the way down to pick up Grand Prairie, Irving as well. So
you were a state rep for a few years before you became
Senator.
Senator.
In the House for 6 years. Yeah.
Outstanding. So, and you know something about election fraud because you're passing laws about this, not because you're actually practicing.
We've
right?
worked on the issue a little bit, worked with Aaron and Craig Goldman, who's here from Fort Worth, on the issue.
Well, it's good to see the local guys taking care of business. As people know, if you're going to run for office, I kind of put this into, I play chess very badly. In chess, how you have the beginning, the opening, you have the middle game, you have the end game. And so, you have to qualify, you have to get signatures, and you have to pay money. What did you have to do, Kelly, to run for Senate?
Well, it all varies, but for the Senate and really, which I simply paid a fee and registered for the Senate, because I represent multiple counties, I had to do that in Austin. So if you're within a single county, you can register within that county. If you represent multiple counties, you do have to file in Austin. So you go to party headquarters for a primary and file and pay a fee. When I first ran for the House, I did collect signatures, which is a way you can do it. Unlike judicial elections, you don't have to. I collected fees, but knowing that filtering those signatures out is very difficult, I went ahead and paid the fee as well, even though I had a significant number on the petition.
So he'll need to know, of course, different offices have different rules, but typically it's either
Correct.
Signatures or money or both or either or something.
Paying the fee is the safest way to go.
Right, but some people get in trouble with the signature part. What have you seen, Aaron?
Yeah. So 3 weeks ago, I guess now, we were tipped off to the petition signatures of a judicial candidate. And unlike state reps and partisan races, judges have to have a certain number of signatures. In this case, it was a justice of the peace, an incumbent justice of the peace for Northeast Tarrant County. He's been in office since 2006. And we looked at his petition signatures and found that on certain pages, all the signatures looked the same. And so we put together a team of people that included some interviewers and some notaries and whatnot. We actually had a couple judges go out with us as witnesses. And we went and talked to these voters and we asked them, simply put, is this your signature on this petition that had been submitted for his access to the Republican ballot in the primary? And what we found out right away was that no, these were not these voter signatures. And of course, the voters get incensed when you show them their name and their signature on a document. I mean, it's identity fraud to a degree, right? And so the voters obviously at that point ask you what it is, and so we explained to them what it was, et cetera. And we had an affidavit that they were able to sign. And the affidavit just said, I've been shown the petition, and I affirm that this is not my signature, and I did not sign this petition. We put together a number of those, and one of the challengers to this incumbent judge filed a contest of his signatures to remove him off the ballot. So that was 2 weeks ago, Monday. And on that Wednesday, this incumbent judge by the name of Russ Casey withdrew his application for ballot access, which technically we were beyond the point that he could withdraw, so the county chair accepted the challenge to remove those signatures, and he's now off the ballot. However, the Sheriff's Department has since taken our affidavits, and they've actually interviewed all of those people, secured their own affidavit. They've actually now contacted all 305 voters that have signed that, and the DA's office has opened a case, and we expect it to go to the grand jury soon.
Wow. So these signatures are no joke.
No. So, well, in this case, I mean, this is forgery, right? And so he actually has committed a felony in this case for a couple different reasons, one of which is if he had just done one, he would have just been a misdemeanor. But in doing multiples, he increased the penalties. He also, one of the things that most people don't realize, most of our forgery statutes in the Texas, whether it be election code or penal code, if the victims of the forgery or of the fraud are over the age of 65, you have a penalty enhancement. So he actually has two penalty enhancements on this, so he's looking at felony charges. And by our calculations, between 93 and 130 of the signatures are forged.
So it's serious.
Yes.
We had of course, we had Jackie Wright, another JP that had the party had to sue, I guess, a couple of years ago because she didn't quite do some things right either. So this is not trivial. And when they say you got to get signatures, you got to really get them. So there have been recent legal changes regarding the signatures.
We changed some of the statute in this last legislative session. Increasing the penalties was one of them. I mean, one of the things that we really ran across was when it came to penalties, and there was no increased penalty. In fact, the penalties were so minor that rarely did you see anybody pursue charges.
That was the case against Jackie. It was minor.
And there was really no incentive not to continue to do it. Number one, the penalties were minor, and there was no escalation of penalties for repeated actions. And so, especially for those that are disabled or 65 or over, there is an increase in penalties for a repetitive action of election fraud.
Well, yeah, I always found it really disturbing when we have these people who are literally the judges who judge our laws and judge all of us for breaking the laws are out there doing the wrong thing to get the signatures that they're supposed to be doing. I mean, it's to get the office. How hard can this be, you know?
Well, one of my favorite stories, if I can interject.
Absolutely.
One of the gentlemen whose signature was forged is a gentleman who's in a wheelchair. Okay, and the person that was interviewing him, secured the information from him, was getting the affidavit ready for him to sign, and the gentleman in the wheelchair looked up at him and said, "How many signatures does he have to get to be on the ballot?" And the interviewer said, 250. And the guy in the wheelchair said, "How lazy do you have to be to not be able to get 250? And I'm like, that's the whole point, right? I mean, if you just put a little bit of energy into it,
right?
I mean, it's beyond understanding that you would go forge 250 signatures is all you needed. So it's insane.
Well, moving to the middle game, you have these campaign finance reports that you're supposed to file. I guess we call it ethics reports, right? And what do you have to do to those? How often do those come?
So outside of the campaign cycle, you have to do them every 6 months, biannual ones. So you do one report for January through June, and you do a report from July 1st to December 31st. During campaign season, you have to do additional reporting, which is one 30 days before the election, another one 8 days before the election. And there's some other technicalities in there, but those are the reports you have to file. So what that means is, let's take right now, we have the primary coming up. We had a report that was due January 5th, but went through December 31st of 2017. Right. And so what we can now do as of last week is see how much money everybody who's campaigning raised through December 31st. Everything they raised from January 1st through beginning of next month, 30 days out from the March 6th primary, we won't know. 30 days before the primary, they'll file another report. And so we'll kind of get an update on where everybody's at. And a lot of people, of course, know this game, right? So if they know they're going to get a big check from a donor, they'll just give it to me January 2nd, you know? And so you have that 30-day report, and then once again, in the middle of early voting, 8 days out from the election, you have another report due.
And what problems do you see in the real world with these reports?
One of the biggest problems TC's actually been looking at addressing, if you want to call it a problem, have mixed...
TC? What's TC?
Sorry, TEC, Texas Ethics Commission.
TEC, yes.
Who is the agency with the most ironic name in Texas. There's nothing ethical about the Texas Ethics Commission. But with that said, one of the things they're looking at doing is the most common tactic that a lot of these campaigns do is they'll just write a big check to their consultant, and then that's it. So they'll have a line item, they'll have a $50,000 check to their consultant, a $100,000 check to their consultant, $25,000 check to their consultant. The spirit of the law is to show what you're spending your money on. Right. And so this consultant is then going out and paying all these vendors.
Right.
And there's no requirement to disclose.
So it hides everything.
It hides everything. So one of the things that's being discussed with Texas Ethics Commission, and it was also discussed with legislature, is about requiring, that's fine, write a $50,000 check to your consultant, but break down how much of that was direct mail, digital, whatever. That's one of the issues. The biggest issue is just the obvious, which is just unreported activity. We have a school board race, for example, over in Dallas, of a candidate who, or she's not a candidate, she's an actual school board member, and last name's Nuttall, District 9. She shows on her report when she got elected $11,000. all of which came from Linebarger. But the interesting thing is,
What's Linebarger?
Linebarger is a tax collection firm. Okay, they collect revenue for governments. They also pay for a lot of voter fraud around Texas. They also, almost every public corruption scandal in Texas you'll find a tie to Linebarger. CNN Money did a 5-piece expose on Linebarger. They call it the law firm that runs Texas, and they list all the different scandals that Linebarger is involved in. Every single one of the original Linebarger partners has been indicted on corruption charges. It's absolutely amazing. And by the way, an untold number of state legislators and senators work for them. We can't count because they don't have to disclose that, but at least a dozen state reps and at least 3 senators do work for Linebarger. With that said, you don't, do you, Kelly? Okay.
I'm self-employed.
Get your halo out.
To your question, one of the biggest problems we see is, so in Nuttall's race, for example, she had canvassers going door to door. She had people going door to door doing a mail-in ballot program. Yet nowhere on her campaign finance report will you find that expense. I know, because we were there, we saw them on the ground, we experienced it. You see that here in Fort Worth ISD. I can tell you, Fort Worth ISD school board members who shared campaign managers,
Right.
okay, who were loaned out to them, according to one of them that I interviewed, by Linebarger. We see Linebarger's revenue partner, Mario Perez, who works as their consultant and yet won't show up on a finance report. Okay, here's a guy who's also been indicted for campaign finance violations in Arlington City Council races. Okay, and so the biggest issue they just simply don't report.
I mean, what can happen in that deal is later, after the fact, if they've contributed to a political campaign, and so if someone were to pay for the block walkers, pay for the printing, they can do that, but that's not really reported till a later period of time. And so it doesn't, if it's unbeknownst to the candidate,
Right.
so you may have someone provide some third party.
Right, sure. And they don't know it at the time.
And if they do contribute in that manner, they have to, at least after the fact, point out that
I got some in kind or something.
Here's who we contributed to.
Right.
So, who has standing? The law says you have to disclose these things, right? And so and somebody gives an inadequate report that says I paid $100,000 to my consultant at the beginning of the campaign, and that's all I did, and they don't report anything, and the Texas Ethics Commission does nothing. Can a candidate who's also in that race say that's insufficient?
So that's a very interesting thing. As a general answer would be that most people are going to file a violation with the Texas Ethics Commission and say, hey, somebody, I point at you, but for example, a senator or whatever failed to report this. There are certain types of contributions that fall under what would be an illegal contribution. Most common, easiest one would be, for example, if you exceed the contribution limit for a judicial race. So judicial races are different than non-judicial races in that they have campaign maximums. You can give $5,000 to judicial candidates in most cases. And it's really kind of a complicated, but let's just call it $5,000 in most cases is the max. So let's say you give a judicial candidate $5,500, okay? That $500 would be an illegal contribution. There are other types of illegal contributions. For example, you can't take corporate money. So let's say you take corporate money. One of the things that people often overlook is the election code actually provides civil penalties for the candidates on the ballot opposed to the candidate who received the illegal contribution. Okay? So if I'm running against you and you receive, let's say I and Kelly are running against you and you received an illegal contribution, the civil penalties actually allow for Kelly and I to sue you civilly and received 2 times the amount of the illegal contribution, in this case $5,500 times 2.
So not just the amount above. The amount above?
It's the amount. The code says the amount of the contribution, and you're a lawyer, so you correct me.
Sure, no.
My understanding is it says the amount of the contribution, so in this case it would be $5,500. So we would be due twice that, plus, here's the great thing that guys like you like, which is plus legal fees.
There you go.
And then
now we're talking.
Now you're talking. and then, but above that, it also allows for the state to receive a 3-time penalty for that. And I think this is something that we always say it's always about the money. And until we start hitting some of these guys with some of that, you're not going to stop some of this. So I think that's something that should be explored more than it has been. Most people aren't even aware that exists. I have a case that you're aware of and these guys were pursuing stuff. I said, have y'all considered civil penalties? And the lawyer hadn't even heard of it, right? So that's something that needs to be explored a little more.
Maybe there'll be a suit sometime soon.
Maybe.
So let's take a break, and we'll be back in a minute.
Hang on, y'all. More with Warren when we get back. Welcome back, folks. You're listening to the White Hat Law Show with Warren Norris. Take it away, Warren.
And we're back. I guess the last part of the game, the end game, is the election, day of election. People, or the early voting and mailing in. Tell us about how that's supposed to go and how it doesn't go.
In what sense?
Well, my understanding is that sometimes the mail-in ballot isn't sent in by the person.
Okay, sure. So what we've uncovered at Direct Action Texas with our work is what's called ballot harvesting. And this is something that 2 years ago I knew nothing about, and we learned the hard way about it. And what happens in ballot harvesting operations is the harvesters, if you will, they fill out hundreds, or in this case thousands, of applications on behalf of voters, and the voters never know that they applied. We just saw this in Dallas in the municipal race, where voters came forward, called Dallas County Elections and said, hey, I got a ballot. Why? Because I didn't apply. In that case, Dallas Elections sent them a copy of their application, and one thing they all had in common was they were done by a gentleman by the name, who operates under the name of Jose Rodriguez. Okay, the Dallas DA has indicted Jose Rodriguez for 766 of these that he did. The previous November election, the Trump-Hillary election, we have him for a little over 1,200 of them. Okay, this is one guy voting that many times. Now, what they do is they send in these applications. The voters then get the ballot. They use different techniques to know when that ballot's going to show up in the voter's mailbox or at their home. And they will then show up at that house, and they use different ways to harvest that ballot, hence the term. So what kind of techniques? For example, in East Dallas, Domingo Garcia has a nonprofit called the Harvest Project. Can't make this stuff up. They literally called it the Harvest Project. Run by a Grand Prairie ISD trustee by the name of David Espinosa. So David and his crew will go out and deliver fruits and vegetables to seniors during early voting. Okay, so they show up, and the senior, of course, will, oh, thank you, you bring us fruits and vegetables. They let them in the house. They come in and start talking about how they're delivering fruits and vegetables to help the community. Next thing, they start talking about the community. We need to be represented. By the way, there's an election going on. Did you get your ballot? Well, as a matter of fact, my ballot came just today. Great, let me help you with that. If you just sign this right here, we'll take care of the rest. The voter then signs the envelope. They take the ballot, they'll fill it out, put it in the envelope, and walk away and go mail that. The voter never knows who they voted for. Okay, so the harvester harvested that ballot. There's other stories. We have a gentleman who lives in front of a school. She tried to get him to vote. He's like, I vote right there. I've been voting there for 20 years. It's 60 feet in front of my house. So she says, well, I get paid for voter engagement. Will you sign my thing so I can get my quota and go home? Who would say no to that, right? So he says, sure. So he signs it. She says, well, your wife do it. So he goes, gets his wife. They sign it. 2 weeks later, they walk across the street to vote, and guess what?
They already voted.
This was here in Fort Worth. So I said, what did you sign? He said, I signed a yellow form with a lot of black whiting. Your carrier envelope that you have to sign to vote by mail is yellow. So when you pull up his application, you'll find that the harvester's handwriting is on the application. But when you look at his carrier envelope, it's actually his signature.
Right.
Now, the interesting thing is the signature on his carrier envelope looks nothing like the signature on his application. So the way the process works is when the application comes in, they take it, they look, see if you're a registered voter, if you're over 65 or whatever, assuming that's the box you check. They then send you a ballot. You send that ballot back in what's called a carrier envelope that has your signature. They then compare, before opening the carrier envelope, they compare the signature on your carrier envelope, which is carrying your ballot.
Right.
They compare that to the signature on your application. If those two signatures match, two people working together as a team, allegedly one Republican, one Democrat, sign off on that, and then it goes, the carrier envelope's open, the ballot's taken out and counted. Once that ballot is taken out, there's no identifier to match those two, so you can never recall that ballot. So it's called the signature verification process in the ballot board. The interesting thing is we found thousands of these in Dallas and Tarrant where the signatures are nowhere close, and yet 2 to 3 people are signing off saying they match. Very problematic. One of the things that Senator Handcock's SB 5 did was add penalties to these members of the ballot board, because there's no way in Dallas County and Tarrant County that these things are happening without these members of the ballot board being part of the plan. Unfortunately for them, those payroll records are public information. We were able to document, we know exactly who the people are, but there's nothing we could do about it, literally. So SB 5, which Senator Handcock authored, and Craig Goldman in the House 184 during a special session, that added penalties for these members if they knowingly do this. It also added something that's insane, which said the two signatures, not only do they have to match, but they have to be the signature of the voter, okay? Not just the same.
Let's talk about SB 5 in a few minutes. Let's continue. Let's talk about the lawsuits or any other lawsuits that are interesting before we get to the SB 5 and the changes. There's some other things that you've been involved in. Did you want to talk about those?
Like Hill County?
Yeah.
Okay. So we have several different cases. Most of our work is mail-in ballot fraud. Hill County was a unique situation. It was actually the first one we went public with, which was the 2016 Republican primary in Hill County. Now, Hill County is a Republican rural district. County seat is Hillsboro, Texas, which is where the two I-35s come together south of the Metroplex here. That particular primary, there was 9,038 ballots cast, allegedly. We requested the election results 2 days after the election, after the primary, which was March 4th, roughly, I think it was. Unfortunately, Hill County didn't give us the data till May, okay? And as you can tell, it's a little bit beyond the window to contest the election or do anything about it. You have 30 days, essentially, to contest an election. So we got it in May. When we opened the file, we immediately saw that they only had 7,171 voters listed as having voted in that election. And if you believe in the concept of one vote, one voter, we had a problem. 9,000 ballots, 7,000 voters. So at first we believed that maybe they sent us the wrong file, you know? So we said, okay, we're missing early, we're missing election, or we're missing mail-in ballots. Something's missing. So we did a full breakdown by precinct, ballot type, paper, electronic, early, election day, all those things. Once we broke it all down, we said, we've got people in every category. Every precinct's represented. So I eventually called the elections administrator, and there was a number of discrepancies we found, the biggest one of which was 18% of the ballots had no voter. And I said, can you explain to me where these voters are? And she said, well, you're doing something wrong. Like, they're all there. I said, you remember sending me the file, right? She says, yes, I remember. I said, I'm using the data you sent me. Where are these? And she goes, well, obviously you're wrong, because if you were right, somebody would have already caught it, because this election had been certified by the Hill County Republican Party, the Hill County Elections Administrator, the Republican Party of Texas, and the Secretary of State all had filed this election. And so I said, well, you know, that's not a good enough answer. Is that your final answer? And she said, yeah. And so long story short, we filed a complaint. The AG came in and impounded those ballots. They conducted a criminal investigation recount and released their report. We published it on our website about 2 weeks ago, which basically listed every mistake they made. It's a litany of mistakes that you can't even imagine. Like, they came up with mistakes that people wouldn't even think were possible mistakes. And they quantified how many ballots. They had Republicans that voted Republican primary, they put in the Democrat primary. Or Democrats that voted in Democrat primary, they put in the Republican primary. People that voted that they never marked. I mean, you name it, they did it. Long story short, well, none of that's criminal. None of that's criminal. Was any of it fraud that was deliberate? So we don't have any indication of that. Okay, we have no indication of a conspiracy or an intentional fraud. What we do know is that at some point that night, they figured out they messed up. Okay, and at some point that night, they're like, "Oh crap, we uploaded the wrong numbers." There were some text messages that we found, etc., that we know that. One of the things I learned through that is there's no positive requirement in the election code that says that if you as county chair find out that you uploaded bad data to teams, to the Secretary of State, there's no requirement that you report that to anybody. It's done. You signed your paperwork.
Yeah.
You just go on.
But
so
that kind of goes for all, or did prior to legislative changes. Nobody was required to report that to anyone.
Nobody has an affirmative duty to do anything about the mistakes they see.
And so those that, let's not say that they would oppose correcting these legislative cracks in election code, but certainly weren't supportive of correcting some of these legal issues when it comes to elections. You know, they'll point to, well, show me, show me, show me. Right. Well, because there was no requirement to report it.
Right.
I mean, we can show. Aaron can give you a litany of cases where voter fraud took place, but we weren't collecting it as a state. We will now.
Right. Well, there's a difference between being sloppy, and you can see, okay, we're 200 votes off, and all the races were won by 20%, so it's not that big a deal, although it should be. But it's still, nobody lost a seat because they
So we
should
don't
have.
know. So here's the thing. What we know is we had 3 races that were won by 60 votes or less on that ballot. We had a total of 8 races that were won by less than 200 votes. Or in the state house race, for example, it was 225 votes across 4 counties. Okay, that one county alone, we had 1,800 ballots without voters from various mistakes. What the AG has quantified is how many ballots were counted double, triple, or erroneously, etc. What they're not going to release is what the new math is for obvious reasons. So we don't know, okay? And the issue is there's no legal recourse if there was. But here's a point I try to make. When we hear the term voter fraud or election fraud, we assign, by human nature, we assign some nefarious whoever the enemy is, right? George Soros or the Koch brothers if you're a Democrat or whoever. But a lot of these things that we find are simply errors and ineptness on the part of the people doing it.
Right.
But if the result is an erroneous election count or result, does it matter if it was nefarious or not?
Sure it does. Sure it does. Absolutely.
Well, the legal consequences might be, but the political consequences, no. Because if an election is called wrong, it doesn't matter if it was nefarious or not, it was called wrong.
Right.
And that's the point I try to make. Like, don't overlook the fact that it could be called wrong and nobody had a conspiracy to make it that way.
Right.
The result is still an election that was
in Hill
counted
County,
wrong.
there may be people who actually won that did not win, even if there was no nefarious reason.
Exactly.
So the wrong person won.
Is in office regardless.
Sure. And that's true in the law in many places. You know, the difference between a fraud and a breach of contract may still be the same, but one person meant to do it. So we care about that a lot more.
It's just very difficult to get somebody to make that call.
Right. Well, in Hill
next
County,
to impossible.
Right.
I mean,
Well,
they'll acknowledge the mistakes. They'll acknowledge
it's a lot easier
the
to prove a
results
breach
could have been wrong.
Yeah.
But it's very difficult, especially after the votes have been counted and announced.
Yep.
And
Nobody wants to admit. It's embarrassing.
It is embarrassing.
for everyone.
Sure.
And I understand that.
Yeah.
But the point I'm making is, I think your response as a lawyer is there's a difference as far as outcome criminally. What I'm saying is, from an election perspective, if it was nefarious conspiracy or clerical errors, but yet the outcome was erroneous results, it doesn't really matter to us, the public, what the cause was. The fact is, we had an election that to this day, the numbers posted on SOS are 18% higher than the number of actual voters, right? And so that's a problem. And what I'm telling you is I have no evidence, no reason to believe there was a plan.
There's no obvious pattern that says, well, this person won because of this set of errors.
We can speculate statistically if we back up all these numbers, what happened, et cetera. But I don't want to get into that. I do think that when you have a constable, commissioners, and a commissioner, constable, and I can't remember the other one, there were 55 votes or less, between 38 and 55 votes, and you start removing 1,800 votes, what are the odds that those are affected? High probability, but I can't tell you that it was.
You don't know what side it's coming from. So,
right,
yeah.
exactly. So that's, in the case of state house race, 225 votes changes that whole thing. We had 1,800 votes with no voters. So I can't tell you if it would have changed the outcome. The AG is never going to tell us if it was going to change the outcome. But
well, he can't, right?
He can't.
Yeah.
Well, I mean,
he doesn't know.
They know.
Oh, do they?
They know.
Wow. Wow.
Correct. but there's nothing you can do statutorily after 30 days. So what's the benefit to releasing those numbers?
Well, shame is a very effective disciplinary tool used in the right places.
But here's the thing. Think about this. What if you beat Kelly by 58 because Hill County counted it wrong, but you had nothing to do with it? You're going to get shamed in that scenario, but you had nothing to do with it.
Well, but I wouldn't feel shame for that. I would probably.
But society would.
Yeah.
But then you go to the next thing. Most of these people that are carrying out these duties, let's be reminded that they're volunteers.
Right.
I mean, a great deal of where some of these errors may have come in Hill County were simply citizens willing to give of their time to come serve in a various capacity. And
well, that's why
you've got to weigh that a little bit of
Sure.
how hard do you come down on somebody who basically says, "Yeah, I'll give up my day," and then they make a mistake. I mean, it's a tough spot.
That's an excellent point. I mean, our elections are run by, I call them paid volunteers, right? Because you volunteer, you get paid $8, $9 an hour,
right?
But you do volunteer to do that, And a lot of times we're asking people, that's one of the arguments with the ballot board, for example. On an application or carrier, you can assist or witness. Now here's the difference. Assist is if I help you with your application or your ballot in any way. Let's say I fill it out in your presence. So it's an empty form and I fill it out, blah, 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 and I just get you to sign it. I just assisted you with it. So I, Aaron Harris, have to sign as your assistant, okay? If you do the whole thing and then I take it from your house and go mail it for you, I have to sign as an assistant. On the other hand, if you're my 90-year-old who has multiple sclerosis and cannot physically sign for yourself, okay, you can make your mark and I can sign it and I can witness it for you. In other words, I signed for you. There's a difference. Members of the ballot board do not differentiate between a witness and assist. And when I've asked election administrators why you don't differentiate, they say, these people aren't lawyers, they're not signature experts, we can't ask them to do that. They have a valid point to a degree, okay?
Well, but then we have the signature board, which we want to make sure we have time to discuss.
Go ahead.
The signature board.
Well, let's take a break, and then we'll come back. We'll talk about SB 5. We'll talk about signature boards and all the changes that are going to fix all these problems. I'll be right back in a minute.
Hang on, y'all. More with Warren when we get back. Welcome back, folks. You're listening to the White Hat Law Show with Warren Norris. Take it away, Warren.
And we're back. And now Kelly's going to tell us all about SB 5 and how we fixed all of campaign finance, and it's all going to work well. And not campaign finance, but the mail-in election fraud, all of that. Tell us about it.
And so it had SB 5, Senate Bill 5, had a couple of different components. I worked with Craig Goldman in the House. Aaron, obviously with his background and work in there, kind of helped us see where we needed to address some issues.
Where are you seeing some holes in the system?
Yeah, there were a few holes in the system, and the system was somewhat ludicrous. For example, just the comparison of signatures. So under the existing code, if you wanted to see if this was a fake or false signature or a legitimate signature, you could use another signature to legitimize the signature for voting on a mail-in ballot. What you could not do is use somebody's legitimate signature to verify that this is not his signature, which makes no sense.
And that was actually in the law?
Well, so we allowed, yes, that was actually in the law. We allowed you to use another signature to verify that, yes, this is truly Kelly Handcock's signature. But what we couldn't do is if you signed my name, what you couldn't do prior to SB 5 was use my signature to prove that Warren Norris had actually signed Kelly Handcock on doing that. And so that was some things that came about. The other thing, and Aaron was kind of key on this because of some of his work in Tarrant County, was electronic signatures, which come in different forms and formats, right? So an electronic signature can be anything from a picture of a signature on paper that's, cropped, cut,
right,
and pasted onto a document. It can be a more clean, sophisticated electronic signature that looks like the signature, or it could be a signature on an iPad that everybody knows looks nothing like your signature.
Right.
It's just some scribbling on an iPad.
Right.
And so there was no statute to kind of clarify what could and couldn't be used. And so when the law's silent, then, Aaron, I think you would agree, the Ethics Committee viewed that, okay, well, it's not addressed in statute, therefore we have to take anything within this whole arena of, well, it's a signature, and so it is a signature. And then there wasn't anything you could do to dispel a signature. So there was absolutely, you tell me if I'm wrong, there was no way to prove a signature false. You could prove it false, you just couldn't use the proof to prove it false.
So one of the challenges with this, to speak to that point, is these people that are doing these nefarious activities are very creative. And the SOS is a statutory agency.
SOS, Secretary
of State.
Yeah.
And so anytime you ask them a question, they will look at the statute and say, statute doesn't address it, therefore we can't. And so they take a very strict approach to their office, which allows them to not have to do a lot, but it allows them to, they're very risk adverse. How's that for an answer, okay? So the Secretary of State's office is very risk adverse. So if the statute doesn't specifically say XYZ, they then just recommend the county err on the side of whatever and accept, in this case, the signature, right? That's what we saw with the digital signatures. That is a uniquely Tarrant County issue. And the SOS, the Secretary of State, took the approach, well, the statute, I mean, literally, the statute says the voter must have their name, address, why they're applying to vote by mail, why they're eligible. You have 4 reasons to be eligible: over 65, disabled, out of the county during the election, or the one that Kelly uses, which is temporarily incarcerated but still eligible to vote. Okay, so those are the 4. And then the last thing you have to do, temporarily incarcerated. The last thing you have to do is you have to sign. Anybody understands that a signature means you, the voter, has to physically do what we call a wet signature, right? Well, the SOS took the approach. It's a signature. We'll take. It doesn't say otherwise.
Yeah, I don't see that as a problem.
Well, and from a legislative standpoint, I mean, Aaron, the Secretary of State's job is not to go into those depths. And the reason we filed Senate Bill 5 was that is our job. We should have been clear. Yes. If we were clear in saying you can use a signature to confirm one, it doesn't take a lot more ink and paper to say, or...
You just want to deny one.
Right.
Well, to me, it's
and so that is our job.
I understand. The point I'm making is a digital signature. Like, you should be able to understand that when the election code says the voter must sign the application, that indicates they must sign the application. And a digital signature lift off an iPad and print it on there would not qualify. The SOS took the approach, well, it doesn't say you can't do it, so we're not going to get involved. And so Tarrant County was in a position to accept the signatures because the SOS is the advisory agency for your local election committee, election county agency. So that's one of the challenges we have, is that the legislature constantly has to respond and reform the code for the SOS to be able to then enact it for your counties to, whereas the guys in the field can just come up with these things ad hoc.
And technology changes.
Right.
The change in technology, because I can go.
It used to. We all knew what a signature meant 50 years ago.
I can go borrow money on an electronic signature, right? I can conduct commerce with electronic signature.
I file lawsuits daily.
And so, and it's why you jest, right, that SB 5 is the answer, is going to fix all this. Well, until somebody does something else.
Sure.
In fact, we know that other things are being done that we didn't fix with Senate Bill 5.
The goal with SB 5, though, is what we found was that, first off, there was a lot of this stuff going on around the state. And when I first found out about this back in 2015, I remember calling a prosecutor at the Attorney General's office I was working on a different case with, and I had no idea this guy did election fraud. No idea. And I called him, I said, I need some advice. I'm finding out about these things called vote harvesting. And he's like, yeah. And I started explaining to him, he's like, yeah. And he started completing my sentences. I said, wait a second, how do you know about this? He says, it's everywhere. So he starts telling me about all these cases he's done. One right here in Dallas County where they removed a JP from office in 2010. He was convicted. Nick Medrano, who's Adam Medrano on City Council's brother, his entire family. We actually have an org chart of the family, about 17 members. We used all their mug shots for the org chart, for the family tree. Anyhow, he was convicted. Nobody's ever heard about these cases. I can name case after case, but I said, so he tells me about how all across the state there's all these voter fraud cases going on. And I said, wait a second, how does the media get away with telling us that there's no voter fraud? And he gave me a couple answers, one of which stood out with me, which was the vast majority of these crimes are misdemeanors. So if you have an investigator and prosecutor out of Austin, from the Attorney General's office, flying to Dallas, to the Valley, El Paso, Houston, wherever, to go interview every witness, to try to build a case, go prosecute a case on a misdemeanor. Well, Warren, you're a lawyer, it doesn't happen. So what do? They do deferred adjudication, pay a $250 ticket. The media comes in and says, show me your voter fraud convictions. Deferred adjudication is not a conviction. So the district attorney or AG goes, we don't have any. The media turns around and goes, there's no voter fraud. Okay? Oh. So the goal with SB 5 was to give them felonies so that we can document
exactly.
This.
And so, what we wanted to do is, especially for those 65 and older and disabled, those that really mail-in ballots are designed to assist, is escalate that. And so, if you did it once, shame on you, and there's penalties that go with that.
Right.
You do it a second time, you're going to find yourself in a lot, hotter water than previously. And so we felt like we had to escalate that because of these repetitive cases that we were seeing over and over and over again. to get that record and increase the penalties, because obviously the increase in penalty is how government works to reduce an action, right? If I want to reduce an action, I increase the penalty. If I want to incentivize an action, I'm going to pay somebody, I'm going to
subsidize it.
I'm going to subsidize it, which we do plenty of that as well.
Right.
The other thing that we were running into is there was no recording at the state level. And so it may happen in Hill County, it may happen in Dallas County, it may happen in Hidalgo, but there was no collection of that data. And so the other thing Senate Bill 5 did was say, if you see this election fraud taking place in whatever form or fashion, you are to send that information to the state so that we may document it and begin to keep record, because we just felt like there's nothing more important to our system of government is to maintain a fair election. And so our focus in the legislation was to do that. We got to make it's fair and it's an honest election. And we moved the ball in that direction. We haven't scored on it yet, but we're moving in the right direction. The problem is every time
there are people losing their seats. I mean, so we're getting there. Just
we're getting
just
there. We still
of,
have room to go. And the reality is, Warren, and if we fixed all the cracks in the election code today, people are creative, and there's those that for financial gain will find ways around the system.
Well, it's one of the things I like about the fact that we can do lawsuits now. This is white hat law. We like to file lawsuits because people are doing wrongdoing, but so often there's no standing for somebody who even is damaged by it, and so you can't undo some of these things once they're done because it's just too late. And so that's a serious problem. That's one of the questions I always ask the legislators: what are you doing to allow? Because right now, the Ethics Commission, if they don't do something, because they do a lot of things based on politics, of who did the wrongdoing, there are contributions made to the Texas Ranger election that apparently came from an empty field. That's the address on the. But there's nothing I can really do about that. There's just nothing I can do about that, and so.
And it is why you don't want Secretary of State, you don't want the Texas Ethics Commission to interpret what's in statute. They want it read and they apply it. It's our job as elected officials to make sure that we're writing the laws in a way that they are understood and applied, and addressing the issues at hand, such as voter fraud.
Right.
I want to we were talking about misdemeanors versus felonies, and I want to give a real life story so people understand what we're talking about. Dallas County is currently holding a gentleman by the name of Miguel Hernandez, who operated under the name of Jose Rodriguez. They have him, his arrest warrant, they have him for harvesting 766 ballots. Okay, you follow me? Right. One guy voted 766 times in a municipal election.
In a municipal election?
In a city council race, okay?
What was the turnout?
Warren, in that district, like 2,000, okay?
Right.
Here's the thing, misdemeanor, except for one. He screwed up on one. The voter rejected his attempt to harvest his ballot. She asked him for his driver's license. She took a picture of it, unbeknownst to him. She would not sign the ballot. He left with her ballot carrier envelope, signed it himself, and sent it in. That is an illegal vote. Out of 766, they got one felony on him. Okay? So people need to understand why this is so important. Here's a guy who's sitting in jail for 766 ballots. Had he not had one voter that was smart enough to get a copy of his driver's license that he then voted on her behalf,
right,
he'd be on a misdemeanor.
Well, and the reality is he's not sitting in jail for 760. He's sitting in jail for one.
Well, technically, he's sitting on jail for parole violation. But yeah, he wouldn't be sitting in jail for that one either. But my point is, people need to understand, this guy could have harvested 766. Right. You can't stack them. Okay, you can't. And he would have been charged with a $250 misdemeanor. Okay, had he not messed up on one. I'm glad for the one. But in our investigation, that Jose Rodriguez / Miguel Hernandez is the 5th most voluminous harvester. We have 4 that do more than him, like way more than him. The largest harvester in Dallas County is the duly elected district clerk. I don't know when Felicia Petrie goes to work. because she harvests ballots like you wouldn't believe. Okay, I mean she can put out paper faster than my HP printer, but nonetheless, Jose Rodriguez is the guy everybody knows about because ABC and NBC and everybody at Dallas Morning News have covered this guy, and yet it's a felony. That's why SB 5 was important. Now what Jose Rodriguez did is a felony, but not till December 1st.
So that's when SB 5 comes in.
It kicked in December 1st last month.
Okay, that's right.
Yeah.
Okay.
Good timing.
Absolutely. Well, gentlemen, I appreciate your time very much. The citizens of Tarrant County, I appreciate that, and of Texas. I'll say on behalf of everybody, unsolicited. Yeah, there you go. No charge. But thanks for tuning in, and we'll hope to see you again next time. And remember, voter fraud is real. You heard it here. Probably, maybe first. I don't know. Depending how much you pay attention. Thanks. Good day.
Well, that's a wrap, folks, and we want to thank you for listening to the White Hat Law Show here with Warren Nord. To find out more about Warren, check him out at nordlaw.com. See you next time.